Okay, I'm back. I just had to restart the broadcast because we had some technical difficulties. And I'm really excited to do today's live stream because, this is a very important topic. We're talking today about overcoming your fear of abandonment, your fear of rejection. Thanks for the love, by the way. Your fear of the things that you really want. One of the things that I ask my clients, anytime I have a new client come on board in our welcome packet, I ask them, what do they really, really want? And then I also follow that question up with, what about that terrifies you? Because that's the reality. The reality is that whether you're a powerhouse, you're someone who's very successful, you've accomplished a lot in your life, the reason you don't have the other things that you want in your life is because there's some fear getting in your way. Now, from my observation, the two common fears are fear of abandonment and fear of rejection, right? So we're going to address those fears today. And in fact, what I'm going to share with you today can actually help you overcome any fear that might be getting in the way. The trick is for you to be able to identify that the fear is running the show, and then you can apply what I'm going to share with you today to eliminate those fears. Cool? All right. So if you're just joining me, my name is Desiree Stafford. I am a coach, I am a mentor, and I help other powerhouse coaches and service-based entrepreneurs basically make a shit ton of money, the money that they know that they're capable of and the impact that they know that they're capable of without burning themselves out. So without, following the old model of working yourself into exhaustion, right? Because that doesn't serve you and it doesn't serve your clients, it doesn't serve the people in your life, right? So that's what I help you do. And what I'm going to share with you today is such an important topic that I encourage you to invite anyone that you think will benefit to show up and watch this. Again, because we're talking about the fear, or overcoming the fears of abandonment and rejection. But what I'm going to share with you can really be applied to overcoming any fear that is standing in the way of you realizing your big vision. Okay? So let's just get down to it. All right? When I got to find space for my notes today. You should see you don't even want to see my desk. Let's put it that way. All right. So the first step in overcoming whatever fear you have, and let me just kind of backtrack a little bit and let you know why this topic is so important, because many of you, you have a bigger vision for your life, for your lifestyle, for your business, for your family, the legacy you want to leave, all that kind of stuff. And if you have these insidious fears running the show, you can literally work your tail to the bone and not know why you're not getting the results that you're wanting to get. Not know why you hop from program to program or mentor to mentor, and yet you still feel stuck, right? So that's why it's so important, because this is one of the reasons why so many friggin' powerhouses play small. And you know that you're playing small, but you don't understand how to move yourself past that point, right? That's why this is so important. So let's talk about the first step. Now, this is my process. It works for me. It's something that I share with my clients, and it's been very successful. So I'm going to share with you what we do so that you can apply it to yourself and your business, your own life even, okay? Because it shows up in so many different areas, and we'll talk about how it shows up, right? So the first thing and pardon me as I look away at my notes, but the first thing that I would encourage you to do is to acknowledge your fear, right? Stop trying to be Superwoman. Stop trying to pretend like you've got it all together. Right? Stop trying to stuff or minimize the feelings that you have, the fears that are really real for you, whether or not they're irrational, right? Just stop doing that. Allow the feelings, allow the fears to bubble up to the surface, right? Now, when you allow them to bubble up to the surface, you just want to be able to feel them and sit with them, not immediately react to them, right? And that's the big mistake. I think a lot of people, especially women, we're taught to be seen and not heard. We're taught to be polite. And oftentimes we're raging on the inside because we have other emotions that we don't allow expression, right? And so what happens, you allow those emotions to bottle up, to bubble up, right? And then you just explode. One of my guilty pleasures is watching the Housewife series, the housewives of, all the different cities or whatever. And I watch the show. I used to watch it for entertainment. Now I watch it, to be quite honest with you. And there's a part of me that's like in shock still. Like, people really behave this way, which is a good example of the fact that you don't have to be a perfect person to have access to a lot of cash, right? So I watch these shows. I was watching an episode last night, and one of I call them characters because to me it's a lot of it seems to be a little bit over the top and fictionalized, right? So one of the characters, or one of the housewives, she she did something that was not, um, uh, I'm looking for the right word without judgment, but she did something that got her into some hot water. Let's put it that way. And her reasoning or her rationalization behind it was, well, she just exploded because the person said something to her and she just automatically exploded. But that's not what we do as adults, right? We have to learn how to manage our feelings and manage our emotions. So even if someone does something that isn't nice or isn't right or whatever you want to call it, that doesn't mean that you immediately snap back. Right now, I get that it's a practice response, but we need to become more responsible, right? So when our feelings come up or when our fears come up, whenever we feel triggered, just because we feel triggered doesn't mean that we can lash back at other people, right? What we want to do is allow those feelings to come up. You don't want to suppress them and act like they're not there. You do want to let them come up, feel them, and process them. Get yourself back to a centered state. Then you can take action, right? But don't automatically go into this response mode. And I'm telling you from personal experience because I used to do the same thing. Okay, I used to not to the same degree as what I just referred to in the housewife story, but I used to be a very reactionary person, and I wasn't even aware of the fact that I was so reactionary. I wasn't, and it took a lot of effort to become much more conscious and aware of what I was actually doing, so that I could take full responsibility and so that I could actually change the experiences I was having, right? So the first thing when there's any fear, negative emotion, any of that kind of stuff, is you want to let that bubble up to the surface without feeling the need to immediately react. Just let it be. And it may feel uncomfortable. I can tell you the first couple times I was doing this, I felt extremely uncomfortable. I felt like I had to say something or I had to do something to get this energy out, and you don't. You can literally allow it to come up within you, right? But you can allow it to come up without trying to push it down, because when we try to push it down is when we start to feel the real sense of discomfort, right? So don't do that, okay? Because you want the fears to come up. Now, once the fears are up, one of the things that I like to do is look for what are the thoughts that are creating the fear. What's the story behind it? What is the past association that you have, or the memory that you have attached to this fear, right? And once you can identify it, and I'll give you a personal example. For me, when we talk about fears and fears of abandonment, one of my biggest fears of abandonment was that when I became as successful as I desired to be, that I would be alone, I would be abandoned, nobody would like me. Because my experience had been that whenever I was successful, whenever I was fully standing in my power, there would be arguments that were started with my family, or I would have girlfriends disappear on me, literally pick fights with me, disappear. I mean, I've had people write me nasty letters. I've had people leave me at restaurants, like all kinds of shit, right? And so I assumed, I made the connection, I made the association that whenever I'm fully in my power and I'm speaking my truth and I'm going for what I want, then other people don't like it, particularly women. Well, actually, that's not true, because I also felt the same about men. I felt that, when I was successful, that I couldn't be in a relationship because I had observed other successful women not being successful in relationships. So there was a lot of this conflict going on, right? And so I just wasn't really dealing with it, I really wasn't dealing with it. And so when I decided that I wanted to be more successful, regardless of what the potential circumstances could be, I had to take more responsibility there, right? So I started looking for the story. What's the story that I have attached? What's the meaning that I have given to my past experiences? Because once we create a story about something, when we experience something similar again, what does our brain do? Our brain creates an association, right? So you want to look for what's the story that you're telling yourself that is creating this fear, that's activating this fear in you again, right? And I'll take questions from you guys in just a moment. Hey, Grace. Hey, Lisa, sorry. Hey, Danny. Hey, Lisa again. I will take your questions in just a moment, okay? Let me just get through these points. But please keep putting them in the comment section, right? So where was I? So I talked about, looking for the story. Now, here's my favorite part of step number 2. You look for the story or the association that you have to that fear. Then you simply ask yourself, what's the worst that could happen? What's the worst that could happen? Right? So for example, if this, like in my case, the story was, when I'm successful, when I speak my truth, when I'm standing in my power, people go away, they don't like me. Okay, what's the fucking worst that could happen? I've experienced that in the past and I'm still here, I'm still breathing, right? So people go away. What's the big fucking deal? There's billions of more people behind them. But you know what I'm saying? Like I've survived. So that means that I can get through this again. Right. Or I can also look for when you think about what's the worst that can happen, let's say, okay, people will leave me and I don't want that to happen. There are people in my life that I'm really close to, that I'm attached to, and I don't want them to leave. Okay. So can you imagine a different alternative? Right? Can you imagine that there's a different alternative, that they don't leave? Maybe the people who you're so afraid will leave you when you're more successful are actually more afraid of leaving you. I posted about that yesterday, right? That's a huge possibility. So you might want to try to reframe that for yourself. But if you don't do this step of asking yourself what's the worst that can happen, you don't actually allow yourself to really face the fear. You don't do that, right? You step back away from it. And the more you step away from the fear instead of running towards it, what happens? That fear becomes stronger. It has more control over you. And what we want to do is allow that fear to dissipate. We want to release that fear. So we want to look at that shit. We want to look at the worst case scenario. We want to see, can I survive in the worst case scenario? And then that gives you the freedom to release it. It gives you the confidence to release it because you're no longer feeling like, oh my gosh, right? Because now you can take a step back and look at it and say, wait a minute. It's not the end of the world. Or maybe what I was thinking would happen won't in fact actually happen. Because when I experienced, the story or whatever happened that I associated with this fear, that was 20 years ago and I'm a different person today, right? But if you don't allow yourself that opportunity, then you allow that fear to become stronger, right? So you don't want to do that. You want to be able to look at it, say, what's the worst that can happen? And then you can make an informed decision from that place. And you know what I want that informed decision to be, right? That's step number 3, which is to take action in the direction of the fear. Meaning, whatever the thing you were or you thought you were afraid of, take action on that thing, right? When we have fear, this is my reframe for fear. It's nothing more than excitement. It's nothing more than trapped energy. And it feels a little bit, different because you might not be allowing yourself to experience excitement at that level on a consistent basis, right? And so when it comes up and when it happens, you think that there's something wrong. There's nothing wrong. You're at your growth edge. If you weren't feeling a little bit of, oh my gosh, right? Then you're just doing the same things you were doing before, which means you were going to get the same results you were getting before, right? If you want a new experience, you have to do something bigger and better than you were willing to do before. So you need to learn to trust yourself in this process. Once you've allowed the fear to come up, right? And you've allowed yourself to just sit with the emotions around that. Then you looked at what's the worst case scenario. You started, letting go of some of the old stories. Then you just take action towards the fear and you realize it was nothing to be fucking afraid of anyway. I remember I used to be afraid of the clients that I'm serving now because they're fucking powerful women. I'm like, oh, these women get me. Because every time they would get on the phone, like if I was doing a discovery session, they'd get on the phone and I'd ask basically questions around, what's the challenge? What are you experiencing? And instead of answering that question, they would go off into a lot of what I call puffery, like a lot of, well, I've accomplished this and I've accomplished that and blah, 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 and da, 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 da. And because I was stuck in my own shit and feeling not as confident as I needed to be at the time, what do you think was happening for me? I'd go into fear, right? And so when I'm in fear or when I was in fear in those situations, I wasn't really present with that person. And so I would allow their puffery to make me think that I wasn't, or to make me feel that I was inferior, right? And once I realized, when I started looking at this, I was like, wait, this is nonsense. They're on the phone with me because they need me. And most of the time I was making more than them at the time, which is very interesting, right? They're on the phone with me because they need me. So how the hell am I the one going into fear? It makes no sense, right? And I did the same process that I'm sharing with you. What are the stories that I have connected around this, right? What's the worst that can happen if I just said my truth? And I wasn't afraid of losing the sale and all that kind of stuff, right? What do you think happened? Now I get to serve not only clients that are more aligned with who I am, but these are clients who inspire me, okay? And they're also inspired by me. These are women who are doing so much amazing stuff in the world. It's unbelievable. That's what gets me excited to get out of bed every morning and serve them, right? I didn't have the experience before when I was signing clients that I felt comfortable with, that it felt safe with, right? Because I was unwilling at that time to stretch myself, to go to my edge, right? So I want you to be very aware of your fears. Remember what I said at the very beginning here, what I'm sharing with you today, and I'll do a recap in a second, but what I'm sharing with you today is very powerful, right? But you have to be able to identify the fears when they come up, which requires you to be conscious. It's one of the reasons why having a coach is so important, right? Because oftentimes I always say call you out, but what I really mean is that when the fear is running the show and you can't see it, because our fears oftentimes they know how to bury themselves in our patterns, right? So oftentimes you cannot see that you're still operating from your fears. It's very important to have someone who has an objective eye who can catch that. I mean, I had a client yesterday that I was just talking to, and she was explaining something about a sale that she recently did. And in the way that it was being explained to me, I said, wait. Why did you why did you do this and not do that, right? And obviously there was a fear underlying that. And it was important that we both saw that so we could understand what's the story that she's telling herself, so she can release that story so that she can make more of the sales that she wants to make, right? But if you don't have that kind of support, it is very easy for you to stay stuck in the same loop, right? Because the mind that created the problem is not going to be the same mind that can get out of that problem. It's why we need support, right? So everything that I share with you is very important. It's very powerful, and I do encourage you to do it. But make sure you also have support in your corner who can help you see where fear is still running the show. Because I will tell you, listen, I'm a very successful coach. I've had other very successful coaches and mentors who help me, right? Even though I'm amazing for my clients and I can see stuff for them, I can't always see my own stuff. I need somebody to call me out on my own stuff at times, right? And it's especially if you're someone who's very independent, especially if you're someone who everyone perceives to be a rock star. And so they're typically tiptoeing around you. They're not often telling you the truth or telling you what you need to hear because they're afraid of how you may react. You need someone who can go toe to toe with you, right? So that you can actually see what you're not able to see on your own. Make sense? Okay. So how much time do we have? All right, I think we have good time. Hey, Karine, how are you? All right, so that's what I shared. I'm going to give you a recap in just a second, but I do want you guys to understand that the steps that I shared with you today are very simple, right? And I'll recap them in just a moment. They're very simple. I only give you 3 steps. And again, they can be applied to overcoming any fear that you want. You do have to be very conscious. You do have to be very diligent and spotting your fear so that you can overcome them. And you can apply the steps I shared with you to overcoming any fear that you may have. We're talking specifically today about overcoming fear of abandonment and rejection. So, the fear of abandonment when you get the success that you want, when you make the money that you want to be making, maybe you're afraid that your husband will leave you, right? Maybe you're afraid that you won't ever find a partner. Maybe you're afraid that your friends will be upset with you and they'll disappear, whatever the case may be, right? So the fear that there's going to be some experience of abandonment may be coming up very strongly for you. And if you don't deal with that fear, what is going to happen? You're going to continue to play small because you're going to continue to do what you think you need to do to keep pace with the people around you so that your relationships are not threatened. And that is a disservice to you. It is a disservice to your clients. It's also a disservice to the people who are around you because you need to be the full expression of who you are. Because if you're not being the full expression of who you are, obviously you're robbing yourself of that, right? But you're also robbing the world of that experience. Even the people who may feel threatened, even the relationships that you perceive may be threatened by you being the full expression of who you are, they still need you to be that person. Because if they are threatened and they cannot stand in your light with you, what will they do? They will fucking go away and find the people that they can stand in light with, right? And you will attract the people who belong in your light with you. Make sense? So it's very important that you understand that. The same thing with the fear of rejection. If you have a fear of rejection, that's preventing you from prospecting. It's preventing you from serving the level of clients that you should be serving right now. It's preventing you from commanding the fees that you know that you should be commanding right now, right? What do you think you have to do? You have to be able to annihilate that fear also, right? So that's why what I'm sharing with you today is important. Now, if you would like some support, to overcome these fears and also be able to make the money and impact that you know that you're capable of, reach out to me. Go to DesireeStafford.com/session. We can talk about how I can help you, right? Because there's nothing that I love more than this. I mean, you guys know, if you've attended any of my trainings before, this is the kind of shit that lights me up. I love to see powerhouses go out there and play a big fucking game, right? Because your success is for you, obviously, but it's also for the other people whose lives you touch, right? So it's not just for you, right? It's not just for you. And so this is how I get to make a real big impact on the world without having to serve hundreds or thousands of people, right? I get to work with leaders like you who I can help, you experience more of who you are and go out and make a big impact. And then it has that whole big ripple effect. Make sense? All right. Now let's take some questions. I have a fear that I'm running over my time, but that's okay. We'll take some questions and then I'll do a recap. So let's see. So Danny says she relates to this so much. So Danny, specifically, what did you relate to? All right. Lisa Scott says, so important to observe our associations and attachments to things. Absolutely. Hey, Lenja, I think I pronounced that right. Hey, how are you? So Lisa Scott says, huge. Regarding people could actually be afraid that you will leave. Absolutely. So if you think about the fact that most of us are walking around in fear in some way, shape, or form, right? That's just a reality, right? Most people are walking around feeling afraid of something. If you can really understand that, it humanizes everybody, and it puts us all on a fairly equal playing field. And I don't care what level of success you perceive someone to be at, they still have some kind of fear. It's part of the human condition, right? So if you can understand that, then you can actually show up much more powerfully. Then you can get over your own stuff to be able to serve people. Make sense? All right. So Lisa Scott also says, you just did a live stream regarding uncritical observation, to detach and observe so you can make a different choice. Perfect, right? Because so much of the time, even for those of us who are very conscious, I call it heightened awareness, even for those of us, we still can sometimes fall into that space of being unconscious because most of what we do is habitual, right? So it's very important. This is why I mentioned earlier that repetition is important. This is not a one and done thing. This is an entire way of being. This is a new lifestyle that you need to adopt, right? Because here's another thing, different level, different devil, or new level, new devil, right? Which means as we, most of the time I'm working with clients who are up leveling their business. So they already have some level of success, but they want to get to the next level. They want to scale, right? And you would think, most people would think, and I know I did for a long time mistakenly, that, oh, well, a person's already making, $500,000 or $250,000 or almost $1 million already, right? And so they're already over all of their fears. They don't need help. Bullshit, right? Because every time we stretch and we're trying to get to the next level, what happens? We have a crisis of confidence, right? We then go into this place of doubt. Oh my gosh, can I really do this? And what will people think of me? And, who am I to do this? And all those kind of things come up, whether they're rational or irrational, it doesn't matter. Those fears still come up, right? So you need to have a process that you go through to allow yourself to release the fears and keep it moving. Make sense? Okay. Alrighty. So Lisa also says, what you speak of is why I created Leverage Your Pain. It matters more to pay attention and course correct, exactly, than so many of the actions we think we need to take. This is, again, why I don't believe in the work harder value system, because I was attached to that value system for a really long time until I started to realize that I was not getting the return on my effort that I used to in the past, because things change as we get to another level, right? We then have to evolve. And what I started to notice is if you just keep pushing harder, doing the same things you were doing over and over and over again, you will not create a different result. You will create more of the same, right? So it's very important that we look at what's actually running the show internally so we know what shifts we need to make there so that our results then change without the pushing, without the forcing, without so much of the efforting. Okay. So Karine says, I'm just seeing this now. Can't wait for the replay. Awesome. Catch the replay. Thanks, Jordan. Okay, so is it Lenya? Sorry, Lenya. Well, thank you for correcting me. I appreciate it. And thank you for loving my energy. Okay, so Lenya also says, darling, your message is so aligned with my thoughts today. Wow. Awesome, awesome, awesome. Okay, cool. So does anyone have any questions about what I shared? Let me go back while you guys are formulating your questions and do the recap of what I shared in terms of overcoming your fears. So I gave you a 3-step process. The first step in the process is for, as I make a huge mess in my office area, the first step in the process is for you to, number one, allow your fears to come up, allow them to bubble up to the surface, right? This is just the same as allowing any other emotion to come up, right? Whether it's emotions of anger, of sadness, of whatever it might be that you perceive not to be light, not to be acceptable, not to be, appropriate, whatever the judgment you might have on your feelings or your fears, allow them to bubble up anyway without feeling the need to react in that moment. Because part of the reason I don't want you to react in that moment is because whatever reaction you would have is going to be based on your old pattern, your old way of being, your old way of doing things, right? So we don't want you to do that. We just want you first to be aware that the fear is there, okay? So you want to sit with it. You want to allow yourself to get centered. You want to just let those feelings bubble up and process them, right? The second thing, and this is also how you learn how to be, master yourself, right? This is how you learn how to have more control, right? When you feel more in control, that's where your power is, because then you can think clearly. Then you know what to do next without feeling like everything is this automatic response that may not serve you. So then the second part of this process is for you to, let's see what my notes say. It's for you to look at the association you have with that fear. What's the story behind it? What are the thoughts behind it? What are the beliefs behind it that are causing you to feel fear? Like what's being activated or triggered, right? Now, once you can identify what that story is, there's two things you can do with it. Number one, you can shift your perspective around that story. So one of the things I said is oftentimes I see so many powerhouses, and I did this myself, holding themselves back, trying to keep pace with the people around them because they're afraid that when they're truly successful, that the people that they love and care about the most will leave them. The relationships will feel threatened, right? So if that's one of the stories that you have, then you can reframe that story, right? And what if the people that you're afraid will leave you are actually afraid that you'll leave them, right? Doesn't that now allow you to show up differently? Doesn't it now allow you to approach that, the story from a different perspective, from a different angle? Right? So the second piece of that is asking yourself, even in that scenario, even if, let's say, they were to leave you, everyone were to leave you, what is the worst that can happen? Right? Are you going to die? Are you know what I'm saying? Like, you're going to shrivel up and disappear? No. Right? Whatever the thing that you're afraid of is, and the story and association you have to that, you've already experienced it, and you're already here, or you're here in the present moment. So it's not as bad as you think, right? So if the worst that could happen is not as bad as you can think, then what do you get to do? You get to release the attachment to the fear that you have over that thing. What most people don't do is actually look at what's the worst that can happen. What they allow instead is for the fear to continue to mesmerize them, to push them back into a corner, right? To keep them stuck where they are. You don't want to do that. You want to be able to look at that fear, look it straight in the eye and say, you know what, worst case scenario, this is going to happen and I can still survive it, right? And then the third step is you take action toward the thing you thought you were afraid of. So if you were afraid to get on the phone and make a sales call, if you were afraid to state your fee is 30K or 50K or whatever K, right? If you were afraid to fire a client, if you were afraid of anything, you were afraid to hire a team or let go of team, whatever the case may be for you. You're afraid to have a conversation with your husband. You're afraid to have a conversation with your friends. You're afraid to have a conversation with your kids. Whatever that thing was that you were afraid of, do it anyway, right? And when you do it, you should feel actually more excitement than the previous fear anyway, because if you've looked at it, the fear, and you've realized that worst case scenario, you can still survive it, then that taking action step will actually feel like more excitement than anything else. Cool? All right. So I hope you guys got a lot of value out of what I shared today. I love this topic. And I hope you guys did too. And again, if you know anyone who would benefit from what I shared with you today, invite them to watch this video, share this video with them. And if you want more help for yourself, if you want my customized or my personalized attention on you and your business so that you can make the money and impact that you know you're capable of, go to DesireeStafford.com/session. And until we speak, I hope you're up to big, bold things in your life and in your business. Take care.